It was the end of a long week. All I wanted was silence. My phone screen lit up on the coffee table, just a single line of text. A credit alert. I subscribe to a monitoring service. It's just good digital hygiene. 99% of the time, it's nothing. A notification that a credit card payment has been posted. Routine. But this wasn't routine. I tapped the screen. The notification expanded. A new credit inquiry had been made against my name. I hadn't applied for anything in years. My breath caught for just a second as I read the name of the lender. It was a high-end automotive financing company, the kind that deals in six-figure luxury SUVs. A very specific kind of status symbol. My first instinct wasn't an alarm. It was annoying. A mistake. That's the first lie you tell yourself. Someone, somewhere, made a typo. So I went to my laptop, pulled up my main checking account to see if anything looked strange. This was the old account, the one my parents have been co-signatories on since I was in college. For emergencies, they said. I typed in the password I've used for a decade. Access denied. I tried again, slower, making sure each character was perfect. Access denied. It's a strange, hollow feeling, being locked out of your own life. Your first reaction is to blame yourself. Did I forget? Did I change it and not write it down? They count on that. They count on your self-doubt to give them cover. And maybe you've had that moment, that quiet gut-level certainty that something is deeply wrong, even before you have a single piece of proof. Let me know in the comments, what was the moment you knew you had to start digging? For me, it was when I clicked the forgot password link. The prompt box appeared. Recovery instructions had been sent to, and the email address on the screen wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before, but it was familiar. It was my brother's name, Leo, with a slight alteration. A different number at the end, a dot swapped for a dash. Just enough to look like a random stranger's email if you weren't looking for it. Just enough to be deniable. Suddenly, two different memories clicked into place, not as memories, but as evidence. The first was from last month. Leo, holding court at a family dinner, bragging about his startup, how he just closed a seed round. He'd said, and I remember it perfectly, "I need a new car to look the part." We all laughed. I thought it was just him being him. The second memory was my mother, a few months back, sitting me down with a folder. She had this concerned look on her face. She said we should all consolidate our banking for better oversight. She'd even offered to help me manage my accounts, to protect my finances. I stared at that fake recovery email on the screen. The luxury car, the locked account, my mother's offer to help, my brother's need to look the part. This wasn't a random hack from some dark corner of the internet. This was precise. This was targeted. This was coming from inside the house. The confusion evaporated, and in its place, a cold, hard clarity settled in my bones. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. They had deliberately and systematically erased my access to my own life. Okay, someone has the key to my front door. The moment that realization hit, that the call was coming from inside the house, I didn't panic. Panic is a luxury. Panic is what they were expecting. Instead, I walked over to my workstation. This is my space, my professional setup. This is where I solve problems. And this was just the biggest problem I'd ever had to solve. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened a new encrypted note-taking application and created a file. I titled it Case File, Larceny. My personal life was now a compromised network, and I was going to treat it as such. I went through the list, methodically. Every account, personal email, backup email, banking, credit cards, utilities, streaming services, everything. I initiated password recovery protocols on the entire digital footprint of my life. I answered security questions I set 15 years ago. I burned my old phone number and activated a new secure one, linking two-factor authentication for everything to it. I worked with the same cold, detached efficiency I use when a client's server has been breached. And a memory sparked, not as a feeling, but as a data point. Me, years ago, setting up the family's Wi-Fi network. My brother, Leo, laughing at me. "Still pushing cables?" he'd said. He mocked the long, complex passwords I used. And my mother insisted I keep a written list of all my important passwords, just in case, in a desk drawer in my old bedroom. At their house, it wasn't a safety net. It was a treasure map. For those of you who are the designated tech support for your family, the one who gets the frantic calls about the printer not working or the Wi-Fi being down, let me ask you, how many times have you had to clean up a mess that you didn't create, but was made possible by the very systems you put in place to protect them? The real discovery came when I finally secured my primary email account. I went into the settings, looking for unauthorized logins, and I found something much worse. A filter. An active rule had been set up. Any incoming email containing the words fraud, overdraft, inquiry, alert, or unusual activity was being automatically marked as read, and then silently forwarded to that same fake email address, the one with my brother's name on it. This wasn't a one-time smash and grab. This was an ongoing surveillance operation. They had a live feed into my financial life. They think they're playing checkers. They have no idea what board I play on. My next step was the bank, the joint account. I called the fraud department, and instead of waiting on hold like a normal person, I used the language I use with system administrators. I talked about unauthorized digital access, potential credential compromise, and suspicious forwarding rules on my primary email. I was escalated immediately. Within minutes, I had access again. I opened the transaction history, and I just scrolled for a long, long time. It was all there, a perfect ledger of their betrayal. It started small, months of little, systematic transfers. A few $100s here, a few hundred there. Then, it got bigger. Payments to a graphic design firm, invoices paid to a web developer, a retainer for a public relations agency. It was all the seed money for Leo's brilliant startup. I methodically exported the last 18 months of statements. PDF files, CSV files. I saved them to a new, military-grade encrypted hard drive. The anger was there, of course, a low constant hum beneath the surface. But my primary feeling was a kind of grim academic fascination. The patterns were so clean. The arrogance was so pure. And it clicked. Another piece of evidence. I remembered Leo's business pitch at that family dinner. He had this surprisingly polished slideshow. My mother had beamed, telling everyone, "Leo is just a natural at this. He's a visionary." I found the invoice from that branding agency in my bank statements. I had paid for the slideshow that celebrated his vision of stealing from me. Then I saw it. The line item that made everything else look like petty cash. A single outgoing wire transfer, $50,000, sent to something called the Apex Holdings Group LLC. The memo line contained just 3 words: initial seed investment. They hadn't just stolen my money for operating expenses. They had made me the primary, involuntary, and uncredited investor in my own brother's fraudulent company. This wasn't just theft. This is a business plan. Apex Holdings Group LLC. I took the name and went back to my workstation. I started an open-source intelligence dive, OSINT, using the same tools I use at work to vet shell corporations. It didn't take long. Public records databases are a beautiful thing. The company was registered 6 months prior. The listed director, the sole officer, was my mother. The registered business address was my parents' home. She hadn't just looked the other way. She was the architect. Have you ever uncovered a secret that so completely and instantly changed the entire landscape of your family? A fact so sharp it cuts every memory you have in two, the before and the after. How did you handle that moment of discovery? Because right then, another memory surfaced. My mother, for my entire life, with her binders and spreadsheets for the family finances, everyone called her organized, meticulous. I now saw it for what it was, training. I remembered her helping me with my taxes last year, insisting she look them over. It wasn't help. It was a reconnaissance mission to get my social security number and every detail of my financial life. She didn't just enable him. She built the getaway car. The final click of the mouse was the worst. I found the incorporation documents for Leo's actual startup, linked through the holding company. I scrolled down to the section listing the company's officers and board members. And there it was. My name, typed out, clear as day. NTO founder, board member, and next to it, a scanned image of my signature. It was a poor forgery, a shaky, unconfident imitation. But on a legal document, it was enough. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had stolen my name, my identity, and made me legally liable for their entire criminal enterprise. There was only one piece left. My father, the silent chairman, the one who always claimed to be bad with money, the one who left everything to my mother. He was willfully ignorant, I'd always thought. Conflict avoidant. But they needed more than just my salary to fund this. I knew he had a separate brokerage account from an inheritance he'd received. I had never, ever looked at it. But I remembered my mother once teaching me a trick to get into his accounts if he ever forgot the password, using family trivia, old street names, pet names. It felt disgusting. But I did it. And I got in. View-only access. It was all there. A history of large, regular liquidations from his stock portfolio. He'd been selling off assets for the last year. And the dates of the sales corresponded perfectly with large deposit dates into my mother's holding company. He was the other source of funding. He was the silent partner. And his silence wasn't ignorance. It was complicity. Is willful ignorance just as bad as direct participation? Let me know where you stand on this. Does looking away absolve you of the crime you're funding? I remember asking him about that inheritance once. He just shrugged and said, "Oh, your mother handles all that. It's for the family's future." I finally understood the chilling double meaning. The last thing I found was in a shared family cloud storage account, one I still had admin access to. It was a chain of emails between my parents. My mother, giving my father precise instructions. Sell 500 shares of the tech fund on Tuesday, one read. This will cover the down payment for Leo's car and the venue deposit for the party. And then the final sentence, the one that I will never forget. Anya's account will handle the rest of the operational burn rate. It was all there. A signed confession in a digital envelope. He wasn't a bystander. He was the bank. With the final email glowing on my screen, the one that laid the entire conspiracy bare, the shock finally subsided. It was replaced by something else. Something cold and quiet and clear. The time for discovery was over. The time for prosecution had begun. I walked over to the large whiteboard in my home office, the one I use for work projects. I erased every trace of my normal life from it. I picked up a black marker, and at the top of the board, I drew 3 columns. I wrote their names. Not Mom, Dad, and Leo. No, I wrote their titles. And Golden Child CEO. And Chief Gaslighting Officer. And Silent Chairman. Then I started to build the case. I took out a pack of sticky notes. Each note was a single piece of evidence. The credit inquiry for the SUV. The forged signature on the corporate documents. The specific dates of the stock sales from my father's account. The wire transfer for $50,000. Every single transfer from my account to theirs. Every invoice they paid using my money. I put each note on the board, under the name of the person responsible. I started drawing lines between them with a red marker, connecting the actions, connecting the people. It started to look like a web, a visual map of my own destruction. I even bought a subscription to a litigation support software, the kind law firms use to manage evidence in complex cases. I spent 2 days scanning, uploading and tagging every single piece of data. Every bank statement, every email, every corporate filing. Each piece of evidence was tagged with dates, account numbers, and the specific federal statute it violated. Wire fraud, credit fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy. It's a strange thing to treat your own life like a crime scene. To see your mother's handwriting on a bank deposit slip and tag it as Orn's Exhibit A. If you had to build a legal case to defend your life, or to prosecute those who wronged you, what's the first thing you would do to get organized? What would your first step be? For me, it was turning their own tactics back on them. And a memory came back to me, hard and clear. Me as a teenager, being forced to create detailed project plans for our family vacations. Budgets and spreadsheets, color-coded timelines, contingency plans. My brother Leo was always excused. But for me, my mother said it was good practice. She was right. It was excellent practice for this. The very skills she had forced on me as a child were now the skills I was using to meticulously document the conspiracy she had masterminded. As I stood back and looked at the board, at this sprawling map of lies, I saw a pattern I hadn't noticed before. The largest thefts from my account weren't random. They all happened within 48 hours of my monthly paycheck landing. Every single time. They knew my payment schedule down to the day. They were waiting for the money to hit before they siphoned it off. The precision of it was breathtaking. I looked at the board, covered in evidence, and a thought crystallized in my mind. I'm not building an argument, I'm building an indictment. With the case file organized on my encrypted drive, I did the next logical thing. I researched lawyers, not just any lawyer. I needed a specialist, someone who dealt with high-value financial fraud and complex identity theft. I found a man whose bio was full of multi-million-dollar recoveries and federal cases. I scheduled a consultation. I walked into his high-rise office not as a victim, but as a colleague. I didn't bring a box of messy papers. I brought a single, neatly organized binder with a one-page executive summary on top. I handed him a pristine copy of my encrypted drive. Then, I walked him through the case. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I presented the facts. The wire transfers. The corporate documents. The forged signature. The emails. I watched his face change. He started the meeting with that look of practiced, patient sympathy. As I continued, it shifted to focused attention, then to visible surprise. By the time I finished, his expression was grim. He was silent for a long time, just looking at the summary sheet. He finally looked up at me and said that in 20 years of practice, he'd never had a client walk in with a case already gift-wrapped for the U.S. Attorney's Office. He confirmed everything I suspected. The wire fraud, the identity theft, the conspiracy charges, all serious, jailable, federal offenses. What's the best piece of professional advice you've ever received? The kind that didn't just help you, but made you feel powerful and in control of your own story? For me, it was what that lawyer said, contrasted with the memory of my mother telling our relatives that my job was just some computer thing, and that I was still trying to find a real career. The lawyer looked at the evidence file, then back at me, and said, "Your work on this is extraordinary. You've done 90% of my job for me." That was validation. But then, he gave me the bombshell. He pointed to the corporate filing with my forged signature. He told me that their conspiracy wasn't just about stealing my money. It was about making me the legal shield. Because my name was on those documents as a CO founder, I was currently legally liable for their fraudulent company. If and when it failed or was sued, the creditors would come for me. They weren't just taking my past, they were trying to steal my future too. He just gave me the names for every crime I've been living. I walked out of his office and onto the busy street. The path he laid out was clear. A police report, federal investigators, a quiet, sterile legal process that would take years. And it felt wrong. It felt incomplete. They had tried to erase me quietly, to turn me into a ghost in my own life, a silent source of funding. Justice couldn't be a quiet, private affair. It had to be loud. It had to be public. An idea started to form. Leo's startup, built with my money and my father's inheritance, was throwing a massive launch party. He'd been bragging about it for weeks. It was the absolute pinnacle of their fraud, the grand stage for their success, and I realized that was the venue. That was the courtroom. I remembered every birthday, every holiday, where my accomplishments, my promotions, my security clearances were glossed over, while Leo's smallest, most insignificant achievements were celebrated with toasts and applause. I remembered my mother's favorite phrase, a line she used any time there was a hint of conflict: "We don't air our dirty laundry, Anya." That memory solidified it. Oh, we were going to air it. We were going to air it, press it, and hang it out for the whole world to see. Do you believe some situations call for public exposure over private confrontation? When is it truly justified to go public with a private betrayal? That night, I went back into the shared family cloud storage. I looked for anything related to the party, and I found it. An email from the event planner to my brother and my mother. It was the run of show for the evening, a minute-by-minute schedule of the event. And there it was, a line item scheduled for 10 p.m., C. and Leo keynote speech, followed by toast to his family of investors. They had given me the time. They had given me the stage. They had given me the audience. They had provided me with everything I needed to deliver my verdict. They built a stage for their success. I'm going to use it for their sentencing. With the indictment built, the plan for the party set, I had one last phase of work to do. I understood how they did it. Now I had to understand why. What was this grand venture I had been forced to invest in with my life's savings? What was this startup my brother was CEO of, the one my mother architected and my father funded? I turned my professional skills, the ones they mocked, onto the business itself. I started with the company website. It was slick, professional, full of jargon about synergistic platforms and disruptive AI-driven solutions. It listed a full team of executives, complete with smiling headshots and impressive bios. I ran a reverse image search on the photos. Every single one of them was a stock photo. The head of engineering was a model from Ohio, who also appeared in ads for a walk-in tub. The chief marketing officer was a stock photo model from Brazil. The testimonials were just as fake, quotes lifted from other tech websites with the names changed. The patented technology they bragged about was nothing but a word salad of marketing copy, plagiarized from 3 different, legitimate companies. It wasn't just a poorly run business. It wasn't a struggling startup. It was a complete fiction, a digital house of cards. They had stolen real, tangible money, my money, to build a fantasy. The sheer absurdity of it was almost more infuriating than the theft itself. Have you ever seen someone try to fake it till they make it, but they forget the part where they actually have to mimic something? This was that, on a grand scale, and a memory clicked into place, a data point from years ago. Leo in high school, showing my parents a C- paper, but telling them this elaborate story about how he'd outsmarted the professor's biased grading system. They bought it completely. This wasn't a new pattern of behavior for him. It was just the final, most expensive version of it. I dug deeper into their public filings, their business registration. There was no client list, no revenue, no product. The company's only source of income for the past 18 months was the money systematically drained from my bank account and my father's brokerage account. It was a financial black hole designed for the sole purpose of projecting an image of success. They didn't build a business. They built a stage play and made me pay for the tickets. So if the money wasn't going into a real company, where was it going? I started the next phase of the investigation, a lifestyle audit. It was time-consuming but straightforward. I had the bank statements from my mother's holding company. I had my brother's public social media feeds. All I had to do was put them side by side. A $2,000 withdrawal from a cash machine on a Tuesday corresponded to an Instagram story that night from a Michelin-starred restaurant. A $5,000 charge at a luxury retail store matched a photo of him a day later wearing a new designer watch. Lavish dinners, front row seats at sporting events, weekend trips to beach resorts. It was all there. A meticulous record of my stolen savings being turned into his personal entertainment fund. What's the most outrageous personal expense you've ever seen someone try to justify as a business cost? I promise you, whatever it is, I have it beat. The anger I felt was different now. It was sharper, more personal. This wasn't about a misguided attempt to build a business dream. This was about funding a lifestyle an Einstein couldn't afford because I was the one actually working. And the irony was nauseating. I remembered my mother constantly criticizing me, telling me I was too frugal, that I needed to enjoy life more, all while she was acting as the CFO for my brother's vacation fund. He wasn't building a company. He was cosplaying as a rich person with my bank account. The key discovery here wasn't a single document. It was a pattern of thousands of tiny, selfish cuts. But the worst was a single payment of $25,000 to a high-end travel agency. The memo line read, "Founders Retreat." I found the corresponding photos online. It was my brother and his girlfriend on a week-long trip to a 5-star resort in Bali. That was the retreat. Just the two of them, living it up on my life's work. My focus then shifted to the chief gaslighting officer herself. My mother, the architect. I knew there had to be more. I went back to the shared family cloud storage. I ran a deep search, looking for hidden or deleted files. And I found it. A folder, buried 3 levels deep, with the generic name, household. Inside, it was anything but. It contained dozens of documents, all written by her. They were scripts, talking points, pre-written email and text message responses, designed to deflect any possible question I could ever ask about money or the family's finances. It was a playbook for psychological manipulation. How do you argue with someone who has a pre-written script for every possible thing you could say? When you realize your conversations weren't conversations at all, they were performances. I read through the files, and my blood ran cold. I recognized the phrases. I had heard them all before. I saw a memory of an argument we'd had last year, a time I'd questioned a strange charge. Her response had been so circular, so confusing, it had made me feel like I was the crazy one. And here it was, typed out in a Word document, her exact words. It wasn't a cover-up. It was a campaign. The most damning file was a document titled, simply, Anya Contingency Plan. It was a strategy guide for how to manage my anxiety about finances. It included bullet-pointed tactics, like using phrases such as, "We're handling it all for your own good," and "You're too stressed from." Your job to see the big picture, and my personal favorite, "We're your family. You need to trust that we know what's best." It was a manual for how to systematically gaslight their own daughter. And that left the silent chairman, my father. What was his price? His silence had to have been bought with something. I searched his folders in the cloud drive. I found the emails. He would express anxiety to my mother about the scale of the fraud, about the amount of money being spent. And she would placate him. Not with lies about the business being successful, but by showing him how Leo's perceived success was elevating their own social standing. She would send him links to articles mentioning Leo's fake company. She would talk about the people they were meeting now, the invitations they were getting. What's a bigger betrayal, the act of the betrayal itself, or the pathetic, petty reason behind it? His complicity wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about buying social status. A memory surfaced of him, glowing with pride, after Leo's new status as a tech CEO got my parents an invitation to a prestigious local charity gala they'd never been invited to before. He'd talked about it for weeks. He didn't just want to keep the peace. He wanted a better table at a better party. The final proof was in an email from my mother to him, after he'd clearly expressed doubt. She wrote, "Think of the club membership, dear. Think of what the Hamiltons will say when they see Leo's new car. This is our ticket." He didn't sell his stocks. He sold me. I thought I had seen the bottom. I thought I knew the full scale of it. But there was one last thing. One final insult. While looking through the dregs of the holding company's bank statements, I found a small, recurring monthly payment. Just under $200. It was to a local self-storage facility. It didn't make any sense. A gut feeling, the same one that started all of this, told me I had to go there. I drove to the facility. I walked into the office, used my legal status as a forged co-founder of the company on the rental agreement, and asked for access. The manager led me to the unit. He rolled up the metal door. And I saw it. Inside, stacked neatly, were boxes. My boxes. They were filled with my entire childhood. My debate team trophies, my yearbooks, every photo album from when I was a kid. All the things my mother had told me with tears in her eyes had been destroyed in a freak flood in their basement 5 years ago. Has anyone ever tried to rewrite your history? To literally change the narrative of your own life by erasing the evidence of it? I remembered that day. I remembered being inconsolable. I remembered my mother holding me, comforting me as I cried over losing all of those memories. And she knew. She knew they were sitting right here, in a metal box. A box being paid for by the company that was stealing my money. It went beyond the fraud. Beyond the theft. This was an act of profound, deliberate erasure. They wanted to literally put my past in a box so that Leo's fraudulent present could have more room to shine. They didn't just steal my future. They tried to delete my past. Standing in that cold concrete storage unit, surrounded by the boxed-up evidence of my own childhood, the investigation was finally over. The case was closed. Everything from that point forward was about preparing for the trial. It was time to forge the weapons. My first move was strategic. I knew from the email filters and the constant, eerie coincidences that they were still monitoring my digital life. They had taught me to assume that someone was always watching. So, I decided to stage a little performance, just for them. I opened my personal cloud storage and created a new folder. A honeypot. I gave it a name I knew they couldn't resist. A new job offer. Top secret. Inside, I didn't put anything real. I created a work of fiction. A fabricated, extremely lucrative job offer from a major defense contractor. A direct competitor to my actual employer. I drafted a fake contract with a salary figure that was breathtakingly high. I added a generous relocation package to a different continent. I made the folder just accessible enough, with security settings that a moderately skilled snooper, like my brother, would think he'd cleverly bypassed. If you knew, for a fact, that someone was reading your private messages, what's the one piece of information you'd want to accidentally let them see? This entire strategy was born from a lesson my mother taught me. A memory of being 15 and finding my diary hidden under my mattress, but in a slightly different position. The sickening realization that she went through my room, read my private thoughts, all under the guise of making sure I was okay. That's when I learned that my privacy was never guaranteed in her house. It was a painful lesson then, but a useful one now. They taught me they were always listening. So I decided to give them something to hear. I set the trap, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 3 hours later, a notification came through. A security alert I'd set up myself. There was a new login to my cloud account. I checked the source. It was from an IP address I had already tagged and identified weeks ago. The IP address of my parents' home. They took the bait. My next step was to prepare the payload for the party. The physical evidence. I wasn't going to just show up and start yelling. This needed to be executed with the precision of a legal proceeding. I went to a supply store and bought 3 professional-grade presentation binders. I spent an entire day printing, organizing, and assembling 3 identical sets of dossiers. One for each of them. Dossier number 1 was for the Golden Child CEO, my brother, Leo. The first tab contained the fraudulent corporate filings for his startup. The second tab had printouts of the stock photo models he called his executive team. The third tab was a collection of his social media posts, the lavish dinners, the designer clothes, the Bali vacation, cross-referenced with my bank statements, showing exactly how each extravagance was paid for. Dossier number 2 was for the chief gaslighting officer, my mother. It contained the incorporation documents for her shell company, listing her as the sole director. It had a full, printed copy of her Anya contingency plan, the playbook for my own psychological manipulation, and it had the chain of emails where she gave my father explicit instructions on which stocks to sell and when. Dossier number 3 was for the silent chairman, my father. It had his brokerage statements, with every stock liquidation highlighted, right next to the corresponding bank deposit slips into my mother's holding company. And it had a printout of the single damning email where my mother sold him on the conspiracy by promising it was their ticket to a higher social status. When you confront someone with a terrible truth, do you think it's more powerful to present one single undeniable smoking gun, or to bury them under an overwhelming mountain of methodical evidence? As I put the binders together, a memory surfaced of my 16th birthday. I was given a $50 savings bond. My mother said it was sensible. 2 weeks later, for his birthday, Leo was given a brand new car. The lesson they taught me, over and over, was that the fun appearance of success and favor was all that mattered. So I made the dossiers look like formal, legal, and final documents. While sorting the last of the bank statements from the holding company, I found one more thing. A scanned copy of a canceled check. It was the deposit paid to the venue for the launch party. And on the memo line in my mother's tidy script were 3 words: "In Leo's success celebration." I wasn't just giving them the evidence. I was giving them a mirror. With the traps set and the dossiers prepared, there was only one weapon left to forge: the ace in the hole. This part of the plan wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about a public and undeniable reset of the identity they had tried so hard to erase. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call the lawyer. I made a call to my direct superior at the Department of Defense. He's a high-ranking official in Cyber Command, a man who doesn't have time for personal drama. So I didn't give him any. I spoke to him in the language we both understood. I told him I needed an official, visible extraction from a potentially hostile civilian environment at a specific time and location later that week. I framed it as a matter of security protocol. I was calling in a very significant professional favor. He was quiet for a moment. And then he just said, "Understood." He agreed that a departmental vehicle and an aide would be there at the time I specified. What does real success mean to you? Is it the car and the watch and the party? Or is it quiet competence and the respect of people who actually matter? That phone call was the answer to every dismissive comment, every belittling joke I'd ever endured from my family, every "still pushing cables, Anya?" every "when are you going to get a real job that people can understand?" My boss, before he hung up, said one more thing. Something I hadn't asked for. He said, "I'll have the general meet you. Consider it done." He meant General Mackay, a name that carries an impossible amount of weight in my world. It was a gesture of profound professional respect. It was the ultimate validation. They were about to see what just a computer thing actually looked like. The night of the party, I chose my clothes carefully. Not for beauty but for impact. Simple, elegant, understated. An outfit that said I was not there to celebrate, but to conduct business. When I walked through the doors of the ridiculously expensive venue, the first thing that hit me was the sound. The sound of my own money being burned on bad music and cheap champagne. I saw it all. The ice sculptures, the catered food, the hired waitstaff in crisp uniforms. An entire ecosystem of fantasy, funded by me. I moved through the crowd, an observer, a ghost at my own feast. And I watched them watch me. They saw me instantly. My mother's smile froze on her face. My father shifted his weight, unable to meet my eyes. Leo, surrounded by a crowd of people he was trying to impress, faltered for just a second. They were nervous. The honeypot I'd set, the fake job offer, had worked perfectly. They were terrified their golden goose was about to fly away to another continent. What's the most surreal moment you've ever lived through? That feeling when you are the only person in a crowded room who knows exactly what's about to happen. My mother made her way through the guests, her expression a tight mask of concern. She pulled me toward an alcove. "Anya, we need to talk," she whispered, her voice urgent, "about this job offer. Don't be rash. We can work something out." She confirmed it. They'd not only taken the bait, they were already planning their countermove. I just looked at her. A memory surfaced of all the other parties, the holidays, the birthdays where I had felt invisible, pushed to the side while Leo held court. Now, I was the center of their gravity. They were orbiting my silence, terrified of what it meant. I gave her a calm, empty smile. "We'll talk later, Mom," I said, and walked away, leaving her standing there. I wasn't a guest at a party. I was a prosecutor walking into my courtroom. Later, Leo found me. He was high on the attention, a few drinks in, and overflowing with the arrogance of a man who believes he's gotten away with it all. He cornered me near the bar, draping an arm around a man who was clearly a potential investor. He wanted to perform for his new friends, to show them the family hierarchy. He gestured at me with his glass. "This is my sister Anya," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Still pushing cables?" The man next to him chuckled politely. Leo leaned in, his voice becoming a stage whisper. "Seriously, you couldn't hack a microwave." Have you ever had to stand there and listen to someone mock you for the very skill you were about to use to dismantle their entire world? I didn't react. I just smiled. That same calm, knowing smile. It seemed to unnerve him more than any argument would have. The insults didn't land. They were pebbles bouncing off a tank. In that moment, I felt an almost out-of-body sense of pity for him. He had no idea what was coming. A lifetime of them using this kind of humor to frame me as the weird, nerdy one, the awkward but useful tool in the background of his glorious life, was all coming to an end. He turned back to the investor. "My sister handles all the boring computer stuff," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "She's a key part of my support system." It was the perfect setup. An unintentional, beautifully ironic introduction. They thought they were delivering the killing blow. They were just writing their confession. At precisely 10 o'clock, the DJ lowered the music. A spotlight hit a small stage. Leo walked up, basking in the applause. He grabbed the microphone and began his speech. He thanked his brilliant team, the stock photo models. He thanked his visionary partners, my mother and father. And then he raised his glass. And finally he said, beaming, "I want to make a toast to my family of investors who believed in me from the very beginning." That was my cue. Before he could continue, I walked toward the stage. I took the second microphone from its stand. The room, sensing a shift, grew quiet. I looked at my brother. My voice was even, steady, and amplified throughout the silent room. "Leo," I said, "I think you mean your soul investor." He froze. I turned to the audience. I held up the first dossier. "I am Anya, and for the last 18 months, I have been the sole and involuntary source of funding for this entire operation." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I spoke like I was delivering a report. I laid out the facts. The Shell Corporation registered at my parents' address with my mother as the director. The $50,000 wire transfer from my personal account to fund it. The systematic theft of my salary, timed to my pay schedule. I held up the second dossier. I described the forged signature on the corporate documents that made me a liable co-founder without my knowledge. I described the lifestyle expenses, the cars, the vacations, the parties, all paid for with my money. All documented. The room was utterly still. Every eye was on me, then on my family. I saw the color drain from Leo's face. I saw the pure, frozen horror on my mother's. I saw the crumbling, pathetic shame on my father's. It was all there. A public confirmation of guilt. What's the one truth you've always wanted to say out loud, but you never had the right moment? For my entire life, I was told not to make a scene. But in that moment, I realized some scenes are necessary. The truth landed in that room not like a bomb, but like a vacuum, sucking all the air out. And into that dead, suffocating silence, the main doors of the venue opened. A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit stepped inside. He wasn't a guest. He scanned the room once, his eyes finding me immediately. He walked directly toward the stage, his footsteps the only sound in the vast space. The crowd parted for him. He came right up to me, leaned in close, and his voice was a quiet, firm whisper, meant only for me, but in that silence, it felt like a roar. "Cyber Ops General Mackay," he said. "Your jet is ready?" The room went silent. I mean, a new kind of silent. Even the DJ had stopped the music. I looked past him, through the open doors. A black government SUV, the kind you only see in movies, was idling at the curb. I looked at my family one last time. Their faces were blank with a kind of shock I don't think they'd ever recover from. I placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't run. I walked, following the general's aide. What would be your ultimate mic drop moment? Your final, unanswerable statement? As I walked toward the door, I saw the faces of the investors, the ones Leo had been so desperate to impress. Their expressions were a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. They were realizing that the family drama they'd just witnessed was not the main event. They were realizing they had been associating with a common fraud, and that the quiet woman he'd mocked as a tech support nerd was someone else entirely. Someone important. Someone real. The door of the SUV was opened for me. I got in without looking back. In one sentence, he erased their entire narrative and replaced it with mine.